The story of Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, remains one of the most disturbing chapters in American true crime history. His name has become synonymous with horror, cruelty, and the darkest sides of human nature. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered and dismembered 17 young men and boys, committing acts so gruesome they defy comprehension. His crimes shocked the world, raised critical questions about police negligence, systemic failures, and how someone could commit such atrocities while living in plain sight. This is the full story of the Jeffrey Dahmer murders. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the first of two sons to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. At first, he seemed like an ordinary child. But by many accounts, Dahmer's early life was marked by loneliness, social awkwardness, and an unsettling fascination with death. As a young boy, he collected animal carcasses, dissecting them to see how their bodies worked. His father, a research chemist, thought his son's curiosity was a budding interest in science. In reality, it was an early red flag of much darker impulses. Dahmer's adolescence was marked by feelings of isolation. By high school, he was a known prankster, often acting out bizarre behavior to get attention, but beneath that facade, he struggled with his sexuality and violent fantasies. At just 18 years old, Dahmer committed his first murder. In June 1978, shortly after his parents' separation, Dahmer picked up 19-year-old hitchhiker Stephen Hicks. Dahmer invited Hicks to his house for drinks, but when Hicks later wanted to leave, Dahmer bludgeoned him with a dumbbell and strangled him. He dismembered the body and buried the remains in the woods. This killing would go unnoticed for over a decade. After high school, Dahmer attempted to create a normal life. He briefly enrolled in college, failed out, and joined the U.S. Army in 1979. While stationed in Germany, he reportedly assaulted other men, but these allegations only came to light years later. After his discharge, Dahmer drifted aimlessly. He was arrested for drunken, disorderly conduct, lived with his grandmother for a time, and held a series of menial jobs. Throughout the 1980s, his alcoholism worsened, and his fantasies grew darker. In 1987, Dahmer killed again, this time 25-year-old Stephen Twomey. According to Dahmer, he awoke in a hotel room to find Twomey dead, beaten severely, though he claimed not to remember doing it. What followed was the beginning of Dahmer's ritualistic pattern. He purchased a large suitcase, transported Twomey's body to his grandmother's house, and dismembered it. After this murder, Dahmer's killings became more frequent and his methods more methodical. Over the next several years, Dahmer lured men to his apartment with promises of money, alcohol, or companionship. Most were young, vulnerable, and often people of color. Once inside, Dahmer drugged them with sleeping pills, strangled them, and then carried out his gruesome rituals. He dismembered bodies, preserved parts, and even engaged in cannibalism. Human skulls and bones were kept as trophies. He experimented with preserving corpses in acid-filled barrels, and even attempted to create living zombies by drilling holes in his victims' skulls and injecting chemicals in a twisted attempt to keep them under his control. One chilling aspect of Dahmer's case is how often he came close to being caught. On several occasions, neighbors reported strange smells, noises, and screams coming from his apartment. Police were called multiple times, but Dahmer always had an explanation, blaming spoiled meat or his tropical fish tanks. Perhaps the most infamous example of missed opportunities occurred in May 1991, when 14-year-old Conor Cynthia Sumphone, one of Dahmer's victims, managed to escape the apartment while heavily drugged and disoriented. Neighbors called police after finding the boy wandering the streets. Officers arrived, but instead of rescuing him, they accepted Dahmer's explanation that the boy was his adult lover who had simply drunk too much. Dahmer even led the officers back to his apartment, where they noticed nothing suspicious and left Conorak in Dahmer's custody. Hours later, Dahmer murdered him. By July 1991, Dahmer's reign of terror was nearing its end. On July 22nd, he invited 32-year-old Tracy Edwards to his apartment. Once inside, Edwards quickly realized something was wrong. Dahmer handcuffed him, pulled a knife, and told him he planned to kill him. But Edwards kept calm, trying to talk Dahmer down. At one point, Edwards punched Dahmer and escaped the apartment, running through the streets with handcuffs still attached. He flagged down 2 police officers, who returned with him to Dahmer's apartment. What they found inside shocked them to the core. Inside the small 1-bedroom apartment, police discovered photographs of dismembered bodies, severed heads in the refrigerator and freezer, jars of preserved human organs, and barrels filled with acid. It was a literal house of horrors. The officers immediately arrested Dahmer, and the world quickly learned of the true scale of his crimes. During questioning, Dahmer confessed in chilling detail to the murders of 17 young men and boys. He described his methods, his cannibalism, and his attempts to create compliant zombie-like partners. His lack of remorse stunned investigators, though he did claim that he killed to prevent abandonment, insisting that he wanted his victims to stay with him forever. In 1992, Dahmer went to trial in Milwaukee. His defense team argued for insanity, citing his necrophilia and cannibalism as evidence of a profoundly disturbed mind. However, prosecutors contended that Dahmer knew what he was doing was wrong. He carefully planned his murders, concealed evidence, and repeatedly evaded detection. After weeks of harrowing testimony, the jury found Dahmer legally sane and guilty on 15 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison, totaling 957 years behind bars. Later, he received a 16th life sentence for another murder committed in Ohio. In prison, Dahmer became both a notorious figure and a target. Some inmates viewed him as a celebrity, while others despised him for his crimes. Reports indicate that he taunted fellow prisoners by shaping his food into body parts or pouring ketchup on it to resemble blood. But Dahmer's life behind bars was short-lived. On November 28, 1994, just 2 years into his sentence, Dahmer was attacked by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, while cleaning the prison gym bathroom. Scarver bludgeoned Dahmer to death with a metal bar. Some saw it as justice finally served. The legacy of Jeffrey Dahmer's murders is one of horror, but also of systemic failure. His ability to continue killing for over a decade raises disturbing questions about missed opportunities, ineffective policing, and societal neglect of vulnerable communities. Many of Dahmer's victims were young men from marginalized backgrounds, gay, Black, Asian, or Latino, whose disappearances were not given the urgency they deserved. The failure to save Conarac Synthesumphone in particular highlighted issues of homophobia, racism, and negligence within law enforcement. The case also sparked broader cultural conversations about mental illness, criminal profiling, and the psychology of serial killers. What drove Jeffrey Dahmer to commit such monstrous acts? Was it childhood trauma, latent mental illness, or a combination of factors? Or was he simply evil? To this day, criminologists and psychologists debate the roots of his behavior. Beyond academia, Dahmer's crimes left a lasting scar on the families of his victims. Each one was a real person with a life, hopes, and dreams, lives cut short in the most brutal way possible. Too often, their names are overshadowed by Dahmer's infamy. But it is crucial to remember them: Stephen Hicks, Stephen Twomey, James Dockstader, Richard Guerrero, Anthony Sears, Raymond Smith, Edward Smith, Ernest Miller, David Thomas, Curtis Straughter, Errol Lindsay, Tony Hughes, Conarac Synthesumphone, Matt Turner, Jeremiah Weinberger, Oliver Lacey, and Joseph Braidhoft. Each name represents a victim who deserved to live a full life, not to be remembered solely as part of Dahmer's twisted legacy. Over the years, Dahmer's story has been retold in countless documentaries, films, and even dramatized series. Some see these portrayals as a way to understand the psychology of a serial killer. Others criticize them for glorifying or sensationalizing his crimes, risking re-traumatization for the victims' families. The Netflix series released in 2022 reignited debates, drawing massive viewership but also backlash from those who felt it exploited tragedy for entertainment. The Jeffrey Dahmer murders are remembered not only for their sheer brutality, but also for what they reveal about society's failures. They show how dangerous it can be when vulnerable communities are ignored, when warning signs go unheeded, and when justice fails to protect those most at risk. More than 3 decades after his arrest, Jeffrey Dahmer's name still evokes shock and disgust. His crimes remain a dark reminder of the evil that can exist in ordinary neighborhoods, behind seemingly ordinary doors. And yet, perhaps the greatest lesson of this case is not about Dahmer himself, but about the importance of remembering the victims, their lives, their humanity, and the need to protect those who are most vulnerable. Because in the end, the true horror of the Jeffrey Dahmer murders is not just the story of one man's monstrous acts, but the 17 young men whose lives he stole and the countless loved ones who still live with the pain of their absence.